Good morning. This is John from the Springs Mennonite Church, and I'm here today to finish up the story of Jacob in Laban's household, away from his home. And as you recall, we've discussed about the fact that Jacob was a cheater, a conniver. He deceived his dad. He stole from his brother. He ran to Laban's house, and then Laban deceived him. It's just a story of deception after deception after deception. And you would think that somewhere along the line, somebody would try to stop this stuff. And in fact, it does, but not yet. And it's amazing that Jacob goes on to be a pretty good guy, but not to this point. And so we see in chapter 31, Jacob runs from Laban. In fact, he doesn't even tell him he's leaving. Laban doesn't find out that Jacob left with all of his two daughters and all of his flocks and all of his servants. He doesn't find out he left for 3 days. And then when he goes to find him, well, son of a gun, guess what? He accuses Jacob of stealing from him. In this case, it was his idols. And I guess the little statues and whatnot that they worship. And it goes on to say that he searched everything and couldn't find them. And he couldn't find them because Rachel, the really special of the two, had hid them in her saddle. And she's sitting on there and she won't get up. So he doesn't find them, and then they have this conversation. We find it in verse 40 of chapter 31. Jacob speaks and he says to Laban, I have worked for you through the scorching heat of the day and through the cold and sleepless night. Yes, for 20 years I slaved in your house. I worked for 14 years earning your two daughters, and then 6 more years for your flock. And you changed my wages 10 times. In fact, if the God of my father had not been on my side, the God of Abraham and the fearsome God of Isaac, you would have sent me away empty handed. But God has seen your abuse and my hard work. That is why he appeared to you last night and rebuked you. Now, Jacob has worked hard. He's brought Laban a lot of wealth, but Laban's not so sure he wants to give any of it away. I think in this story we see lots of different kinds of people. What we haven't seen yet is the kind, gracious person that God wants us to be. And Laban says this. Now, you can't blame him for this. He says, these women are my daughters. These children are my grandchildren. And these flocks are my flocks. In fact, everything you see is mine. But what can I do now about my daughters and their children? Come, let us make a covenant, you and I, and it'll be a witness to our commitment. Now, Laban isn't quite right because he agreed that Jacob could have certain kinds of sheep and keep the others. But he's right about the fact they're his daughters and they're his grandchildren. And Jacob is determined to go back home. And so we arrive at this point in the story. And Jacob and Laban make a covenant. Now, a covenant is unbreakable. A contract you can break. In fact, many times within the body of the contract are the reasons and rationales to why it can be changed or broken. With a covenant, there is nothing that can be changed. This is a decision, and this is it. And so we read their covenant. It's kind of interesting. They make a pile of rocks, which is an altar, and it means witness pile, the name of it. But here's the covenant. And Laban said, May the Lord keep watch between us to make sure that we keep this covenant when we are out of each other's sight. If you mistreat my daughters, or if you marry other wives, God will see it even if no one else does. He is a witness to this covenant between us. Well, obviously, Laban doesn't trust Jacob. Jacob doesn't trust Laban. And they have a 20-year history of trying to deceive each other. And now they come to the end of their togetherness, if you will, and they propose this covenant. The covenant's really simple. May the Lord keep watch over what we've agreed to. And may the Lord watch out if you mistreat my daughters, Laban says. And if no one else sees you, the Lord will. Well, I'm not suggesting that we make covenants like this. After all, if you're not honest, what's the point of agreeing to something? The other party can break it and construe all kinds of reasons as to why it's okay. You see that a lot in marriages that break up today and other things like that. But what's really important is this very last sentence. Well, next to the last. God will see it, will see what you do, even if no one else does, because he's a witness to what we've just said. You see, God watches out for us. Now, he's not like Snoopy on the doghouse trying to catch us doing something wrong, but he does watch out for us. And even though we may try to skirt around the corner a little bit, we don't fool him. In fact, we can't fool God. Jacob fooled Laban, Laban fooled Jacob. But neither one of them fooled God. And in our daily lives, we need to just know that God is looking out for us. He's watching, maybe when nobody else is. But he cares for us. That's why he's watching. He wants to enable you to experience something better than perhaps where you are. And I know some of you today haven't found that pathway, haven't found that relationship with the Lord, or you found it and it's gotten a little weak, or you've allowed circumstances to dim your commitment. Whatever, God wants you in the fold of his hand in all circumstances. And that's the bottom line. Jacob doesn't get it. He's still got more things to deal with, and we'll talk about those. We don't hear about Laban anymore, so we don't know what he did. But you and I can get it. We can understand just how much God cares. And I hope you'll think about that, and you'll orient your life around that principle. Well, thanks so much for listening. If you have a need or a concern, let us know. We'll do whatever we can as fast as we can to help meet your need. But here it is Friday, so have a really good day and a really, really good weekend. And I'll be back on Monday and we'll talk about this character, Jacob, a little more. Take care. Be safe.